Truthfully, pre-sales isn't for everyone. You don't have to be an extrovert, but you also have to not hate talking to people. I think what's important is to really have a thorough understanding and, dig deep and really research what the role entails in order to figure out if it's a right fit for you.
The Tony Moze Podcast.
You have reached the Tony Moze Podcast, where in this segment, I interview tech professionals of all levels in marketing, sales, pre- and post-sales on their journeys, hoping to inspire you, yes, you, to make the transition from your previous career and into the tech world. This is an audio episode with many video sequences to come, and if you are interested in other aspects, you can also follow me on other outlets, including LinkedIn at Anthony Palmozzi, Twitter at Tony_Moze, and YouTube at Tony Moze, where I provide you with a different angle from my experiences as a former psychology worker and military veteran turned tech professional. Today's guest is Maddie Stremick. She was a former psychology major turned human resource professional who got her first opportunity to pre-sales from a previous company, and now she helps individuals become successful in pre-sales through an educational platform founded by the Presales Collective called the Presales Academy, where people with non-technical backgrounds can transform into knowledge and experience-ready professionals for pre-sales roles. In this episode, we talk about her journey, pre-sales, the Presales Academy, and whether it's the right role for you in your future. So, preface this, I have attended the Presales Academy. It was wonderful for me. However, there are some instances, perhaps, maybe you might need to go, maybe not. But either way, we uncover it on this, and I'm going to just also say, I do not get paid for this. I'm doing this pretty much as exposure for all you guys who are coming out, for everyone coming out of a non-technical place, coming out of the military, getting out of college and really trying to figure this out. So let's figure out a little bit more about pre-sales. Maddie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, so this is cool. People to know that you and I are part of this group called the Presales Collective. But the thing is that you are working with the Presales Academy, right?
Yeah.
So, what could you say a little bit more about Presales Collective from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Presales Collective is a global community of pre-sales professionals. So folks from all around the world doing the same thing that we all know and love, which is sales engineering or solution consulting, lots of names for it. But I actually joined part of the collective as a member when I was in pre-sales, and actually had an amazing experience of connecting with other folks that were in the same place as me. We shared advice. We would, chat on Slack. And attend live person events. And then I ended up joining on board, and now I'm on staff. But it's a great community, like Tony said, for aspiring pre-sales professionals as well as very seasoned pre-sales professionals. So we do webinars, in-person events, blogs, resources, research publications, etc.
So the question I like to ask, and thank you so much for talking a little bit more about that, about Presales Collective. So if anyone's interested, definitely check it out. And of course, I'll leave some links for people to go check out as well in regards to that and everything else that we're talking about today. So the question I ask everyone who comes here, because it's always good to see people's journeys, what was the things that happened that got them there and whatnot. So the question I say is, I ask is what was the aha moment, or inspiration that made you say, hey, I want to get into pre-sales?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very fortunate that I truly did stumble into the role, and I didn't actually have to go apply and find the role. The role found me. So I was asked internally to make that transition at the company that I was at. So I went from an HR program manager to a solutions consultant, and was the sole one at that organization at the time. So for me, I was actually, when I was approached about it, I had no idea even what sales engineering was. But for me, the aha moment and the deciding factor that led me to say, yes, I want to do this was the idea of a new challenge and a role where I would be much more hands-on with the technology and much more hands-on with our prospects and customers. So that really excited me. And that's ultimately why I decided to say yes, despite it being a complete pivot from what I was doing previously. But that I think that was the deciding factor ultimately, was just the idea of a new challenge and the opportunity to be more hands-on with technology.
And you were a psychology major, right?
Yes, I was an IO psychology major.
Wow, industrial organizational psychology.
Yep.
Yeah, they used to talk a lot about that, when I was in school, like, oh, instead of clinical, you should think of IO because that's where it's lucrative. So, so you being in HR, or at least you thus far being in this pre-sales world, and working in with the academy as well, like, what have you learned about the myths, about applying for or having a pre-sales job?
Yeah, so I think what's very common when I talk to people that want to pivot into pre-sales is that it's not necessarily a myth, but I would say it's a little bit of a gap where folks don't always know what the role entails. And so a lot of times, you hear about pre-sales and you hear, oh, I'm going to be working with customers and I can make a lot of money and it's going to be, a great role in tech. But not everyone truly knows all the ins and outs of the role. And I think that that's really important because truthfully, pre-sales isn't for everyone. You don't have to be an extrovert, but you also have to not hate talking to people and not hate presenting, because in pre-sales, you're often on the stage presenting a demo or a POC or, working on an RFP presentation as well. And so I think what's important is to really have a thorough understanding and, dig deep and really research what the role entails in order to figure out if it's a right fit for you.
So, in your experiences, what candidates have you seen get pre-sales jobs coming out of non-technical jobs and backgrounds? Like, what have you seen as like titles of their previous roles?
Yeah. What's amazing is I've gotten to either see from afar or work, one-on-one with folks from all different backgrounds. So like first grade teachers or even third grade teachers. I've worked with a gym manager previously. I've seen folks from HR, talent acquisition, make the pivot. I've worked with individuals that, were in real estate or, a loan officer. So there's really there's no box as far as the perfect profile of what kind of previous experience you should have in order to make the pivot. Truthfully, anyone can make the pivot. So I've been fortunate to just kind of see a lot of folks from different backgrounds. But I will say previous educators, regardless if it's elementary teachers or high school teachers, they're some of the brightest and smartest folks that I've had the privilege of working with, and their experience transfers really well into pre-sales.
See, that this is cool. People sometimes get worried about, perhaps I need to have a computer science degree. I need to go to software boot camp. The ideas from some of the people that I hear are always like, oh, I need to be technical. But like from what I'm hearing is that people are coming from all different types of backgrounds, non-technical backgrounds, and that's a breath of fresh air to hear that. So we talked a little bit about the Presales Collective, what that is, but now I wanted to talk about the Presales Academy. Can you let people know, because of the fact that there's so much information and ideas of training, there's like certifications, you could go here for it, you could read a book on that, but it's spread out everywhere. And what is this Presales Academy about? Like, what can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Presales Academy is ultimately a virtual boot camp designed to help career changers make the pivot into pre-sales. So we really focus on helping you develop the right competencies, getting the right training and the right knowledge to be successful, as well as providing you the network and support to ultimately make that pivot. What we found is that a lot of times if you're a career changer and you just do a cold application to a pre-sales role, there's a good chance that you're going to get an instant rejection. And so what's really important is a network heavy approach where you're connecting with individuals and, having real life conversations before you're just submitting applications. And so we really kind of provide both of those components in the program and then after the program. So it's that training and then that network and support.
That's awesome. And if we could get a little more into the nitty gritty, like what would you say are a few resources they get provided with? What do they get to learn as well?
Yeah, so the program has really evolved a ton. The structure of the program is actually revamped recently. And so students ultimately experience and get hands-on training with every key pre-sales activity within the sales process. So starting with RFP, doing the technical requirements, to doing actually live discovery role plays with a pre-sales coach, and then demonstrations, a technical validation, project and presentation, and so much more. So the program is really not just like a passive learning experience where you're just attending lectures. Instead, it's focusing on hands-on projects and basically experience that fills the gaps that you might have as a career changer.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. So these graduates, right? The ones who graduate from the academy, where have you seen the types, of first SE jobs coming out? Like, where have either employers been casting out the net saying, "Hey, we want people from your academy," or where have you think you've guided the group or the cohorts towards?
Yeah, so it's definitely a mix. And so students that go through our program, or, if you're just considering a career pivot in general, one of the best ways to look for roles is on LinkedIn, honestly, their job board. And then we also have our own job board on the Presales Collective. So I'd encourage you all to check that out. And then with students, we also work directly with hiring managers that have open roles and that want to consider career changers. And so we encourage them to, apply, do their own networking. And then on top of that, we also try to connect them directly with hiring managers. So is it a combination?
Maddie, we talked about this before because it was a new phenomenon to me. The whole idea, I always thought when I associate pre-sales, I think of SaaS. I think of software as a service. I think of companies like Salesforce, DocuSign, they're anything that's involved in that kind of software as a service package. But then I got hit in another way, and I found out there's other paths of being pre-sales. There's mechanical engineers as pre-sales. There's there's IT data centers, the pre-sales, people. Which would you think might be the easiest for people to apply to?
Yeah, so if you're first making a pivot, I would recommend probably shooting for a SaaS pre-sales role and or enrolling in a boot camp that's internal to a company. So like someone such as yourself that did Dell, they had an incredible kind of ramp program, right, to help people really learn the ins and outs, because in an organization like Dell, you're not just dealing with software, you're also dealing with hardware, which is very, very different. And so that it can be hard to pivot into that directly. So if you do want to do the like other types, like what are sometimes called system engineer roles, etc., then, a boot camp can be a great option. And then I would say for kind of the more SaaS roles, there's more functional products that are like CRMs that are much more easier to get ramped up on as someone that doesn't have a technical background. So I would say kind of like the more SaaS products are going to be a little bit easier to pivot into and also to learn. But it's ultimately up to you and your background and your interests. I know, Tony, you did the kind of hardware route, and that was a little bit of a different experience, I'm guessing, for you.
Yes, it was. And for everybody who's listening too, I also went through pre-sales the Presales Academy. Is it fair or okay to say that I call it the Presales Collectives Academy? Just to distinguish.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah. It's under the umbrella of the Presales Collective. So yeah.
Yeah, I have to say that because after Presales Collectives Academy, right, I went into Dell Technologies Academy. It's been many iterations of names there, which perhaps recently it's been called Next Generation Academy, or just called the Presales Academy. But I like to distinguish between the two. That I went through Presales Collectives Academy, and then I also went to Dell Technologies Academy. And I want to definitely say for people who are listening that the Presales Academy is a great fundamental, like you get the base, you get the fundamentals of pre-sales, because the things that I learned in the Presales Collectives Academy, right, was applicable to, there were definitely things that were applicable at Dell, like around my cohort, I was seen as the person who's like, wow, how do you know this stuff? I was like, because I was able to get this training from Presales Collectives Academy. So, you're teaching people, off the street, as I like to say, random people, whatever word you want to say, people who have never heard of pre-sales before, and you're giving them these skills so that when they go into any kind of company, whether that's SaaS, like IT data center or mechanical engineer, whatever kind of pre-sales roles out there, they have a leg up now, So, I never thought I would be in IT data centers. I thought I was just going to stick with SaaS, like the regular route goes. But in the event, person listening, you might find yourself doing something beyond SaaS. And if you do, definitely find something that puts you in an academy within that company. So, yeah.
Yeah, great distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. So what have you noticed with employers? Like, what are they looking for? What are employers looking for in a new career SE? Like, someone who just got out of the academy, or someone who's just looking for their first SE job.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest things that's really important and probably gets talked about a lot, it's probably been talked about on your podcast before, is the curiosity component. And so that's not just being like, oh, I'm just curious about things. It's I'm curious about learning more, and I'm going to go find a way to actually learn more about what I'm curious about. So that sort of technical curiosity of, even if I don't know it now, I'm hungry to learn more. And I'm also willing to put in the work to actually close that knowledge gap. So I think it's that curiosity and that level of like commitment and drive, because ultimately, if an employer is hiring you as a career changer, they're taking a little bit of a risk. Because you haven't been in the role. What happened? Like, what if you decide you don't like it? What if it's too challenging for you? And so they're trying to also weigh that out. And one of the things that they're going to be looking for is that level of curiosity and drive. And then on top of that, it's communication skills. I mentioned earlier, you have to not hate talking to people. It's important that you can communicate with others and be able to present. And a lot of times when you go through the interview process for a pre-sales role, you do have to do some type of presentation or demo. And so that's where they're really looking to see, how would you communicate our solution ultimately to our customers and to our prospects. And so that level, strong communication and storytelling is really, really important. I think the other thing that kind of falls under curiosity is some like additional certifications or technical skills. So you don't have to have a technical background to make the pivot into pre-sales, but you do need to be actively trying to close that gap. So taking additional certifications or just learning about key technologies is going to be really important. And ultimately, if you haven't done that research, that's going to kind of come out in the interview, that lack of kind of knowledge and understanding of, SaaS sales in general and technology. And so it's important to kind of do some additional digging and close that gap prior to interviewing.
And you just said something which led me to this final. Well, the last questions here is certifications. Like, how about this? Whether they go into an academy or not, or if they're just doing anything offline, right? What are like some certifications they should consider taking? Because I know people ask me, what can I do to improve, to get more familiarized in this field? What should I be learning? I'm hearing certifications, they're thinking of books, they're thinking of things. Like, what would you recommend them, learning or taking up, in regards to the certification or educational route?
Yeah. So I would say it is important to have, just basic pre-sales knowledge. So, reading some books on pre-sales, like 6 Habits of Effective Sales Engineers by Chris White is a great, just kind of opening, or starting point. But then as far as on the more technical side, it gets a little difficult because from my understanding, there isn't a like golden standard certification for each of the things that I'm about to talk about. But instead of talking about what certs that you should get, I'm going to talk about what technologies you should learn more about and, find certifications on. The biggest one is, integrations and APIs. Any type of pre-sales role, that is going to be really fundamental that you have at least an understanding of the business, benefits of integrations and APIs. Ultimately, when you're selling technology, that technology needs to talk to other systems and solutions that your prospects have. And so having an understanding of APIs is going to be really, really important and is going to be applicable to any pre-sales role. And then on top of that, I would recommend diving into additional kind of topics around like front end web development. So HTML, JavaScript, CSS, just having an understanding and being able to kind of read. You're not going to be setting up websites in most cases, but you'll look and see on a lot of requirements for job descriptions in the pre-sales space that, having some understanding in these areas is really important. The other one I would recommend is SQL or SQL. That's going to be really applicable to a lot of different pre-sales roles. So definitely APIs and like cloud computing is, applicable to any type of pre-sales role. And then on top of that, I would recommend kind of that front end and SQL as additional kind of topics to dive into.
So people ask that question, like, do I have to know how to code, like go through a coding boot camp? And that's not, and just to, again, reiterate, do they really need to know how to code?
No, in most cases, no, you really don't. But it is important to keep in mind that pre-sales roles exist on a continuum of complexity. And so some roles are going to be much more complex and require much more, of a technical background, even the, ability to code, versus others are going to have much more functional products like CRMs and solutions in like the MarTech space. Those are going to be much more functional and often don't require that, like those deep technical skills.
Awesome. Well, Maddie, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all the info here. I hope people got some good nuggets from this. And of course, again, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony. It was a pleasure.